Sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't romantic at all. They don't unfold over candlelit dinners or handwritten letters. No, the truest ones are often the quietest, hidden in the sterile corners of hospital rooms, passed like gentle secrets between strangers who were never meant to meet. This is one of those stories. She was a woman who had everything money could buy: designer gowns, ocean view penthouses, and a last name that could open any door. But in the end, none of it could buy her what she needed most: more time, more connection, more moments not just lived, but truly felt. Her voice had been lost to illness, her world reduced to beeping machines and blank ceilings. She had wealth, but no one to listen, a legacy, but no laughter. And then a caregiver walked in. He didn't have a mansion to his name or a resume line with accolades. What he brought instead was a worn-out heart, the kind that breaks open wide for others. He didn't come to fix her. He came to care. And one day, without knowing anyone was watching, he did something simple, something sacred. He sang. It wasn't a grand performance, just a lullaby, soft, steady, full of soul. But in that small room, the song filled every inch of silence money had never managed to soothe. What neither of them knew was that outside the door her estranged son, a millionaire himself, had stopped in his tracks, frozen, listening. The melody reached into the parts of him he'd buried beneath years of success, ego, and regret. And for the first time in decades, his heart cracked open. This isn't just a story about music. It's about healing, about how love can arrive in the humblest of forms, through a stranger's voice when no one else will speak your name, about how sometimes the most powerful goodbyes are sung, not said, and how a lullaby, born from compassion, can echo across generations. You won't forget this one, not because it's loud, but because it's true. Evelyn Monroe had once reigned like royalty over Atlanta's high society. A ballet teacher in her youth and the widow of legendary real estate magnate Richard Monroe, she was a name whispered with admiration at charity galas, art openings, and country club brunches. But legacies don't keep you warm at night. And in her twilight years, Evelyn lived alone in a sprawling mansion with 12 immaculate rooms, each one echoing with absence. Only one room mattered now, the silent bedroom where time stood still. At 82, Evelyn had suffered a debilitating stroke. The doctors called it severe. She couldn't speak, barely move, and though her face still held the sharp angles of beauty from decades ago, her eyes had grown distant, like she'd been exiled from her own life. Around her, the estate remained polished, run by a rotation of nurses, housekeepers, and groundskeepers who clocked in and out, always polite, never personal. They saw charts. They saw tasks. But they didn't see her, except for one. Tasha Green was 34, a caregiver by trade, but not the kind you find through an agency. She worked freelance, word of mouth only, often taking on the patients no one else wanted. Too combative, too broken, too far gone. But to Tasha, there was no such thing as too late. Every person, no matter how silent, how still, carried a soul that still deserved to be met with kindness. She arrived at the Monroe estate not with degrees or flashy credentials, but with something rarer: warmth. She wore her hair in braids pulled back under a cotton wrap, carried a tote bag patched from years of use, and walked into that cold mansion like it was her grandmother's porch. The staff watched her with vague amusement, whispering behind their clipped smiles. She didn't mind. On her first day, Tasha brought small things: a vase of sunflowers, soft lavender slippers, and a thermos of ginger tea steeped just the way her own mother used to make it. But the most surprising gift she brought wasn't anything you could hold. It was her voice. She hummed while folding linens, sang softly as she adjusted Evelyn's pillows. Gospel, old Motown, bits of Nina Simone, sometimes just a lullaby with no words at all. She didn't sing for performance. She sang because silence felt too heavy to leave alone. And Evelyn, though she never said a word, began to blink more, breathe deeper. Something in her loosened, and neither of them knew. Someone was listening. Would you like me to continue into the next part? When the sun arrives, overhears the song, and everything begins to shift? One rainy evening, the kind that turned the Monroe estate's marble floors cold and made the world outside feel miles away. Tasha moved through Evelyn's bedroom with practiced tenderness. She'd just finished feeding her. Spoonfuls of warm soup with soft encouragement. And now, with gentle fingers, she brushed Evelyn's silver hair back from her forehead, the way a mother might soothe a child before sleep. The only sound was a rhythmic tapping of rain against the long, arched windows. And then, without planning it, without even thinking, Tasha began to hum. It wasn't just any tune. It was Summertime from Porgy and Bess, low, slow, and hauntingly sweet. A song from another life. Her grandmother used to sing it while shelling peas on the porch in Alabama, her voice floating out over fields, steeped in memory and longing. Tasha hadn't heard it in years. She didn't know why it came to her now. She just felt it. But something happened. Evelyn's eyelids fluttered. Her fingers, so still for so long, twitched against the blanket. And then, impossibly, a tear rolled down her cheek. Just one. Silent but unmistakable. Tasha froze, then leaned closer, not to startle her, but to witness her. Evelyn wasn't asleep. She wasn't gone. Somewhere deep within the elegant, immobile frame, the music had reached her, not as sound, but as recognition, like a light in a distant window. From that night on, Tasha sang every evening. Sometimes it was jazz, sometimes old gospel or lullabies passed down through generations. Songs with no sheet music, just feeling, soul. And every time, Evelyn responded in the only way she could, a twitch of her hand, a sigh, the deepening of breath. The silence between them changed. It became sacred. Soon, even the staff noticed. They began lingering in the hallway at night, pretending to tidy up just to hear that soft, steady voice. Some recorded snippets on their phones. Others wiped away tears and said nothing at all. The room that once echoed with emptiness now held something you couldn't see, but everyone felt. But what Tasha didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone else had started watching, too, and he hadn't stepped foot in that house in nearly 15 years. Shall I continue with the son's entrance and emotional shift? Miles Monroe, Evelyn's only son, a name whispered in venture capital circles, plastered across tech magazines, and spoken with reverence at Stanford alumni dinners. At just 42, he was already a Silicon Valley giant, a millionaire many times over. Algorithms, IPOs, electric cars, he had his fingerprints on it all. But he hadn't set foot in his childhood home in over 3 years. Too busy, he told himself, but really too hurt. Their last conversation had ended with slammed doors and voices raised, rare for two people so practiced in politeness. Evelyn had brought up the past, as she often did. Miles had snapped back, saying he never felt good enough for a mother who had always seemed to love appearances more than the messy truth of him. The ballet recitals, the etiquette lessons, the endless pressure to perform. He had worn it like armor his whole life, and when he finally laid it down, it came out as anger. So he stayed away. Until now, a business trip rerouted him through Atlanta. The flight arrived early. He told his assistant not to book a hotel. Didn't call ahead. Didn't even know if he wanted to see her. But something pulled him toward that mansion. Curiosity, guilt, maybe just the emptiness of a life filled with stock tickers and sterile apartments. He arrived just after sunset. The house was unchanged, glowing faintly beneath the porch lights. He let himself in with the old code, the one he'd vowed never to use again. The marble floors were still cold. The air still smelled like lemon polish and ghosts. And then he heard it. A voice. Not a radio. Not a recording. A voice. Rich, textured, warm enough to wrap around the walls. A woman was singing, "You are my sunshine," slow and soulful, like it meant something. Miles followed the sound down the hallway, his steps cautious. He paused outside his mother's bedroom door, and what he saw stole the breath right from his chest. There she was, Evelyn Monroe, the woman who had once towered over gala rooms and charity balls, now lying still in her bed, her hair brushed back, her eyes open, tears streaming down the sides of her cheeks. Not blank tears, present ones, awake, aware, and beside her a young black woman, holding Evelyn's hand in both of hers, seeming like the world had stopped spinning and only this moment mattered. Miles didn't move. He couldn't. His throat tightened, his chest clenched. He hadn't cried since college. But that night, he did. Would you like me to continue with the emotional aftermath? Miles' conversation with Tasha, the reconciliation, and what changes in his heart. The song faded into silence, the final note hanging in the air like a prayer. And then a soft knock at the door. Tasha turned, startled to see him standing there. Miles Monroe, taller than she expected. Tired, too. Not the kind of tired that comes from red-eye flights or board meetings, but the kind that settles in the bones after years of carrying things unspoken. He didn't say anything right away, just stepped into the room, his shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor. He looked at his mother, her fragile body, her glistening eyes, the quiet grace still clinging to her like perfume. And then, without ceremony, he sank to his knees beside her bed. "Hi, Mom," he whispered, voice cracking under the weight of years. "I'm sorry." He didn't try to explain, didn't list reasons or dig up wounds. Just those two words, simple, sacred. Tasha said nothing. She stood quietly on the other side, her hand still wrapped around Evelyn's. And for 15 long minutes, the three of them remained there, one unable to speak, one barely able to breathe, and one holding the room together with nothing but gentleness and grace. Eventually, Tasha slipped out to give them space. But Miles followed her into the hallway, his heart still thudding in his chest like it was trying to remember how to beat for someone else. He caught up to her by the grand staircase. "Why?" he asked, voice low. "Why do you do this? Why sing Why Care So Much?" Tasha paused. Her fingers curled lightly around a banister as she looked back at him, not with pity, but with truth. "Because," she said softly, "someone once sang to my mama when I couldn't. A nurse. A stranger. My mama was dying, and I was stuck halfway across the country. But that nurse, she sat with her, held her hand, and sang. Said it was the least she could do. That kindness, it saved me. So now, I'm just passing it on." Miles stood there, stunned into stillness. All the technology he'd built, all the problems he thought he'd solved, none of it could touch what she just said. It was too human, too real. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek silver business card, his name engraved. Below it, an offer, any offer. A job, a scholarship, connections, money, whatever she wanted. But Tasha only smiled. Warm. Sure. Unshakable. "I already got what I came for," she said. And with that, she turned and walked away, not in triumph, but in quiet victory. The kind that comes from doing the right thing when no one's watching. Shall I continue the final emotional beat? Evelyn's passing, Miles' transformation, and how he honors both women's legacies. The next morning, as soft light spilled to the tall windows of her bedroom, Evelyn Monroe slipped quietly from this world. There was no struggle, no dramatic gasp, just a final exhale, peaceful, delicate, like the closing of a curtain at the end of a long, elegant performance. On her lips rested the faintest smile, the kind that whispered, "I heard you. I wasn't alone." The night before, Tasha had sung one last song. Not upbeat, not mournful, just steady, true, amazing grace. She sang it sitting beside Evelyn, one hand resting lightly on hers, the other folded in her lap. No audience, no applause, just a caregiver keeping a sacred promise until the very end. The funeral came quickly, attended by Atlanta's elite, politicians, philanthropists, journalists. Everyone wanted to be seen mourning the grande dame of Southern real estate. The service was grand, held in a marble church Evelyn once funded. There were flowers imported from Holland, a choir in tailored robes, eulogies read by polished voices with practiced cadence. But the only moment anyone would remember, the moment that truly mattered, came near the end. It wasn't spoken by a billionaire, a socialite, or even a well-dressed priest. It was sung. Tasha stood alone near the casket. No microphone, no instruments. Just her voice, unadorned, unwavering. She sang not at the crowd, but through it, straight into the heart of the woman who once lay silent in that grand house. Her voice carried every ounce of grace, pain, love, and release that words could never touch. And when she finished, when the final note trembled into silence, the room sat still, for a breath, then another, until Miles stood. Tears ran openly down his face. No shame, no pretense. He clapped, slow, reverent, real, and one by one, others joined in, not out of politeness, but from something deeper, something true. Would you like the closing scene now, showing how Miles honors Evelyn and Tasha and how the story lives on? They say music heals, but sometimes it does more than that. Sometimes it reveals the quiet cracks in our hearts, the apologies we never spoke, the love we were too proud or too broken to show. It pulls back the curtain on who we really are and who we still might become. For Miles Monroe, that song, that single moment of grace in his mother's final days, changed everything. In the months that followed, he channeled his grief into purpose. He founded the Evelyn Grace Project, a nonprofit dedicated to bringing musical therapy to seniors in memory care. Not just high-tech tools or sterile wellness programs, but real music, human voices, connection, the kind of healing no algorithm could code. And every time a song played in one of those quiet rooms, he thought of his mother and the woman who had sung her home. And Tasha, she didn't end up on talk shows. No book deal, no viral video with 1 million likes. She returned to her quiet life, where love wasn't measured in clicks but in moments. She went on to sing at 8 more bedsides before retiring. 8 more souls who left this world not in silence, but in song. She never did it for money. She did it because somewhere deep inside her, in a place not even grief could reach, she believed every person deserved a final lullaby, a voice to say, you mattered, you were not forgotten, you are loved, even if no one was watching. But this time, someone was. And maybe that made all the difference.